I was at school. I wasn't very like everyone's at school by law. I was incredibly unacademic and incredibly naughty. I'm not recommending this. It was quite good fun at the time, but I don't recommend it, particularly as you can't really pursue anything, any career now without any qualifications. And because I was so badly behaved, I got no GCSEs, which is quite an achievement. And because I was at quite a sort of progressive school, I mean, it was a state school, but anyway, it was a London state school. They let me stay on to do A levels. So I did get A levels. And then I went to drama school because I thought I wanted to be an actor. But I always felt a bit like a phony because I'd been the class clown and I don't know how I knew I was funny. I suppose I just knew I was funny because people in the class would laugh at stuff I did, which, as I say, was being very naughty. But I was also quite rude to teachers. Again, I'm not recommending this, but that was part of my kind of drive as a performer, sort of mucking about and making the teacher annoyed. So I did get A levels, and then I went to drama school because, as I say, I thought the way of channeling the showy offiness and the lack of interest in academia of any description. I didn't want to go to university or do more homework or anything like that. So I went to drama school. But then at drama school, you get taught to do Shakespeare and Ibsen and loads of serious plays. And that always felt a bit weird. But I did it because I thought that was how you became an actor. And this was the late 1970s, and comedy in the way that you guys would know it now had not sort of taken hold. So there weren't comedy clubs. I mean, there might be the odd bloke, particularly in America, doing stand-up, but it wasn't like you guys will notice, there'll be every pub has got an open mic night or, comedy like it is on television. There were sitcoms, obviously, and funny things on TV, but not comedy in the way that you could access it now. So every time I got an acting job, I always felt like it was a matter of time before somebody would say, you can't really do this. You're not supposed to be here. And maybe because of that slightly sort of not taking it properly seriously attitude. And I did have a lot of acting jobs where, I had to be crying about my dead dog or, getting lost somewhere or pretending I was sad, all that. I always thought, oh my God, everyone's going to know that I'm mucking about and that I don't really mean this and that I haven't really lost my dog and whatever. And then I met a comedian that most of you will never have heard of called Alexi Sale. And I was already watching a lot of comedy. And funnily enough, the only people that were doing comedy, women that were doing comedy and I hadn't even formed an idea of what I wanted to do, but the people I liked and watched on television were American female comedians who were definitely ahead of the game in terms of women's representation in comedy. And some new people who were my age, but were just starting out doing live comedy were French and Saunders. And they had each other, but I didn't know how I would access doing live comedy like that. So I started doing comedy a bit on television, not as a stand-up, which I would never say I've really been. But what would happen is, I suppose because of my slightly irreverent attitude, I started getting cast in comedy things. And then, as I say, I met this comedian, Alexi Sale, who's a male stand-up, and he's from Liverpool, working class background, and he used to do very political stuff. And he's about 6-7 years older than me. And he said, oh, you're quite funny, why don't you kind of work with me? And we did more stuff together. And then I began to write stuff for him and me to do. And we used to do, I wonder if this is offensive. I'm going to say it anyway. One of the sketches we did that I wrote was 2 lesbians running a bike shop called The Menstrual Cycle. Quite funny, I think, still. And then, like like anything, it sort of snowballed from there. That was when I suddenly realized, and I think whatever job you go into, I'm going through this with my kids now who are 25 and 23, it takes so long to find out if it's the right place for you. It's like, it's obviously on a much bigger scale, but it's like trying on a pair of shoes. You'll wear these shoes because that's what you've got, but they don't quite fit and you don't feel right in them, and you think people are looking at you going, why are you wearing those silly shoes? And then when you find the pair of shoes that really fit you, you think, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be wearing. This is where I'm comfortable. And then you really start to motor. But I do think it takes a very long time and a lot of trying on of shoes to go, oh, maybe this is the right fit. Because, for example, my daughter's training to be a lawyer, but she didn't do law at university. She did a law conversion, and she keeps saying, I don't think I like this. And she's 25, but she started on that kind of treadmill, and she's going, but if I get off now, what do I do? And I said, I've no idea, but, you know, and how many of us have the luxury of being able to try lots of different things? You don't. So that's a bit of background. I then so I kept writing comedy, doing bits and bobs on telly. And then I worked with, most of you probably won't have heard of him either. I worked with a guy who was very, very famous at the time called Harry Enfield, and doing sketches with him on telly. And then he had two writers, some of whom did stuff in front of camera as well, called Paul Whitehouse and Charlie Higson. And they broke away from Harry and said, we're going to do our own sketch show and we want you to come with us. And so that was called The Fast Show. And then that was probably, yeah, definitely the first time that I was involved fully, writing my own stuff, doing my own stuff. And it's probably safe to say for all of you, you'll be something you need to know. 97% of performers, actors, comedians don't earn a living. They will earn under $3,000 a year. So 3% of performers earn enough to live on. So you need to remember that. It's an incredibly, I'm not saying you shouldn't go into it, but I'm just saying it's very, very, it's a very hard place to earn a consistent living. So you might see someone in EastEnders and think, well, they're famous and now they're an actor. But once they're out of EastEnders, they may not work for 5 years or again. You know, you see lots of people changing careers because they just can't earn a living, a consistent living. So it was really The Fast Show, which was 26 years ago. And that show became very successful. That kind of meant because I trained after drama school, I trained as a secretary. So I used to do temp work to basically pay my rent and pay for food and stuff. So because I know I probably sound quite posh and I've got a posh name, but neither of my parents gave me anything, certainly didn't give me any money. A lot of judgment, but no money. So yeah, so that's me. Yeah, and then there was The Fast Show, and then it kind of snowballed from there. So, and then I wrote a book entitled Does My Bum Look Big in This? So for anybody who's heard that catchphrase, it is mine. And the book was very successful, and it was a character I'd done in The Fast Show. And from then on, I went from being somebody who a handful of comedians and producers knew to being someone that people would say, oh, I like her, and they would employ me in other jobs, or would sort of listen to me if I had projects that I wanted to do on television. Sorry, you probably just heard that ping. I don't know how to turn that off.
No problem.
And yeah, that's my background.
Yeah, nice. Thanks for giving a nice overview. It's kind of great to hear all the little tidbits. And I didn't know that about your book. I knew you'd written the book, Does My Bum Look Big in This? But I didn't know that you coined the phrase.
I did know, and it's in the Oxford Book of Catchphrases. It says coined by Arabella Weir in The Fast Show. That book was an international bestseller, and I can name you the title in quite a few other languages, including Malaysian. And yeah, that changed my fortunes.
Yeah.
I mean, I did earn money in the fast show, but the book really kind of took. So
okay, so our next question is kind of around comedy, and you've talked a little bit about this, that it's kind of not straightforward. Very clearly from your own journey, it's not like this is how you get into the industry sort of thing. But are there any things that you would recommend, or any pathways, or would you recommend any future comedians do a particular course or anything to try and get into comedy?
Now is a fantastic time for any kind of minority. I'm not saying you shouldn't go into comedy if you're not, but I'm saying if you're in any way, you know, people want to hear those voices now. People are kind of tired of white middle class people going, oh, you know, what about bringing up my children or whatever, you know, fairly sort of generic problems. It will be the scariest thing you've ever done in your entire life, but there is no better way of learning and cutting your teeth than to do open mic spots. And so the first thing is you need to do is, what do I want to say? What have I got to say? What do I think is funny? And then there are open mic spots in practically every town in Britain. So it doesn't have to be a London thing at all. And you just apply there. The first thing I would do before doing that, and it's often free. I mean, you're too young, most of you guys, to be allowed in pubs, but see if you can go to open mic spots in wherever. And if you can't go, because, I mean, I'm sure, anyway, I won't say anything illegal. If you can't go, then watch as much comedy as you possibly can on television of the style that you think you would be good at. Because you'll spend half the time thinking, that's not funny, I don't like what they're saying. And then you think, how would I do this differently? But you'll also get a flavour. You won't get any sense of what their lives are like other than when they're on the camera for those 3 or 4 minutes. But that will give you a sense of how sort of disjointed a comedian's life is, or even a performer's life. And then once you're old enough and allowed to, but even if, for example, let's say you're all under 18 and you literally can't do an open mic spot at a pub because it wouldn't be legal, you could put a thing together yourself at your school, a comedy night, or at a community centre. It wouldn't cost you very much, if anything, to do it. And, you know, literally set up your own open mic spot. You will know if you are cut out for that job within a few times. It is, I mean, there is literally nothing more scary than standing in front of a mic, in front of strangers, and having to set out a joke. But the other thing you need to, that should, I hope, make you less worried, is it doesn't have to be joke. You can tell a whole story about how something happened to you. It has to be engaging, and obviously it has to be amusing. I mean, it can't be how you went round to your granny's and your key wouldn't fit the lock. I mean, it could be if you could make it funny. But if you watch comedians, you'll see that it's not that they tell you a hilarious story about falling off the bus and how the whole bus laughed at you. It's not that the thing that happens is that funny. It's your interpretation of the story you're telling. You also watch as many American comedians as you can, including the greats, you know, like Richard Pryor and, you know, Chris Rock. And you might not, I don't always agree with some of the stuff Chris Rock says, with some of which I can find pretty anti-feminist and offensive, but you are looking at people at the top of their game. A bit like, I'm sure lots of you are into football, and my son is obsessed with football. Now, he's never going to be good enough to be one, but he watches it the entire time. He knows exactly how this guy plays, that guy plays. he doesn't yet watch the women's football, thank you very much, but we'll get onto that. But so he's skilled enough to be on top of the way every one of these players plays, even though they're not all in his team, Arsenal. It's about studying, I don't want to sound pretentious, but the craft. Just like if you wanted to be a racing driver or a fashion designer or a makeup artist, you got to sort of immerse yourself in that world and study the people you admire. And I mean more than on Instagram. Do you know what I mean? You've really got to study what they're doing, because it's the difficulty with going into this career is, I didn't know this word till I was in my 40s. So there's no meritocracy. Now, for those of you who don't know what that means, as I say, I didn't know what it meant. It means, so you study to be a doctor or a civil engineer or an architect or a bus driver. You have to do the course, and then a standard, a nationally accepted standard will go, yes, you can drive that bus because you've got the driving license and you passed the bus driving test. And we've done, we've done it. Or you're an architect and they go, right, you've done an architectural degree. Now there's a standard that you've got to achieve. And then thereafter, your success at that job will depend on how much you put into it. With comedy and performing and acting, there is no standard. I mean, I'm not going to name them, but there's some really famous actors who are so bad. And me or all my mates were going, my God, they're so bad. How did they get that series? And everybody in my industry, certainly my friends, knows they're bad. But for some reason, they have national appeal, or they were just right for that, or so there's no, you can't work in a hospital if you're not a doctor or a nurse. You're not allowed to give people injections because you haven't passed the standard. You can certainly do the comedic or acting equivalent of giving people injections if you're crap. That's the other difficulty. There is no kind of standard. Some people are really successful. I know actors who had to give up, who were really, really good, who just never cracked it. They never got that one job. They never met that one person. And they had to give up because they couldn't earn a living.
I think you've given some really good advice as well in that one, which is one of our later questions. So I won't ask you that, but yeah, some really good advice, kind of for any young people who does want to kind of go out and maybe think about going into comedy. And I appreciate that you're also being very realistic and you're not kind of sugarcoating it, because it's definitely a difficult industry. And if you're going to set out to do that, you need to be fully aware of what it's going to be like.
No young person wants to hear this, because it sounds like, well, it sounds like an insurance policy that an old person would tell you to take out, which I suppose it is, because an old person is telling you to do this. Harrison Ford was a carpenter, and he did that for a lot of the time before he became a movie star. You won't know him, but a very successful comedian I know, he built my kitchen. Because he was a carpenter, and he was actually doing quite well, but he wasn't doing well enough consistently to have a family and, have a flat and all that sort of thing. So if you are going to go into this industry, you'd be very well advised to also learn to do something else. Or once you're in this industry, I mean, a really successful actor I know, you won't know him, but he works all the time. He's a bricklayer as well. And every single time he doesn't have an acting job, he's on 250 quid a day building walls, and he gets work like that. I keep trying to get my son to be a plumber, but he's not having it. My son's not even an actor, just a wannabe footballer.
Okay, so our next question is, what's the difference between writing content for TV and film compared to a live performance? And are there any key skills that you need to develop in order to do these?
If you're writing for television or film, you've got the edit. You can go over and over it again. And if it's a film, and I've only written one film script which never got made, but you're getting paid a lot of money and lots of other people are involved. So you'll present this script and then 20 other people will go over it, and they'll go, no, but this, and then a producer will go over it, and then that producer might change hands, and there'll be another one. So there's many people taking care of that baby, you know, not just you, but and the same for television. And it will be gone over and over again, even if it's just television where you've written it, and then it's a script editor, then it's a producer and a director, and they'll go, oh, does that person really have to live in a place like that? And you can change things, but you have time and you have input from others. I mean, that even if you don't want it, you'll get it. When you're writing a live show, in my case, you are on your own, on stage. There can be no creases, no blips. You have to have written something. I mean, that doesn't mean you can't make mistakes when you're up there, and I've done that. But then you have to have the confidence to let the audience know that you made a mistake. Or you go, that's not the bit I was supposed to be at. I'm supposed to be at this bit. And then you take them on the journey. So basically, you're telling a very long story. My live show was about an hour and a half with a break. So you're taking them on it wasn't one story, but you're taking them on a journey. So there can be no blips. You know, it has to be so tight, and you have to try it out. And what you do, you probably know this, you guys, is you try it out a million times where people either pay nothing or they pay a tiny bit. So you let them know that you're trying this out. And I mean, if you guys were to set up any sort of open night or, you know, open mic night or anything like that, you just say to them, I haven't finished this. I'm trying to work it out. I'm trying to work it out. And then they know. And you'll find that audiences are incredibly generous and with you. You just always have to, it sounds so, trying to think of not a swear word, pretentious. The other word I was thinking begins with W and ends with Y. You're taking them with you, and as long as you involve them. So you go, listen, I want to tell a story about the estate I live on and how this happened, but I haven't decided on the ending yet, and I don't know how to end it, so I'm just going to tell you this story, and you're going to help me write it, because afterwards you'll go, oh, I told that whole bit and nobody laughed and people were looking at their watches. So I don't want to sound like I think I'm amazing, but there is a certain amount of, you've got to be a bit of a gladiator to do soul performing, because you are literally going, it's just me. Thank you for paying 20 quid to see me. I'm now going to entertain you for an hour and a half. And they can't ever see you going, oh, this isn't going well. Or what bit am I on? You know, because, I mean, imagine if your teachers were going, oh, what are we doing today? Shall I do maths? Or you'd begin, what? It's not that you're looking for a leader, but you know, when a solo performer is taking you, they're literally taking you on a journey, and you want to know they know what they're doing. But that doesn't mean you can't include them in the, listen, I've started off on this tangent. I thought I was going to tell a story about my grand's estate, and actually, no. You just have to have the confidence to let them know when you've made a mistake. But the short answer, as you can tell, I'm a bit of a waffler, is that a live piece has to be much tighter than, because on television you shoot loads of stuff, and the same on film, which you'll never see, which the audience will never see, and then you go, oh, we won't use that take, because it's all in the edit that everything is tightened up and brought together. And the edit just takes place in a room with maybe the writers and the director and an editor, and that's it. Now that's a good job, an editor. You've got to be very patient. But live is live. And you know, when you're going to, as I did, a national tour, and you arrive in Chorley, they're not interested in seeing you going, oh, I don't, will I do this bit? So it just needs to be very tight, focused.
Okay, awesome. And our final question of our formal interview before we move on to our student Q&A is, and you've kind of talked a little bit about kind of being on stage and obviously the script writing and the difference, but a lot of, or not a lot, but some comedians kind of end up in a box where there's like an expectation, particularly when someone creates like a persona. But how can you, on both sides of this maybe, how can you avoid ending up feeling like you're stuck in a box when you are in kind of the comedic industry, and how do you develop it if you want to develop a persona? So the other side of that as well.
Well, I can think of some comedians of my sort of generation, one in particular, and no disrespect to him. He does forgotten his, again, I'm having a senior moment. I can't remember his actual name, but he does a thing called Pub Landlord. What's he called? Anyway, he's been doing that for 40 years. He does it, he sells out. He's obviously got no interest in doing another performer because that's his gold, that's his pot of gold. And he's been doing that, for about 35 years. Al Murray, Pub Landlord. And
I just Googled it. I was just about to let you know.
It's pretty much, it's obviously different material, but you guys can probably imagine he's a sort of white, I don't know what class, but a white sort of bit of a geezer, doing they came in my pub the other day, and then he'll do all the jokes based as if he were a pub landlord. I think, look, if you're lucky, you get successful, and at doing, in his case, pub landlord, in my case initially, does my bum look big in this, and that's who you are. And by and large, you're not going to go, can you stop seeing me as that? Because you've been working for so long, you're going, thank God they've finally noticed me. And you will get cast as that, or you'll get booked as that, and that will be what people want. And mainly, I think you're just glad that you're getting paid to do the thing you like doing. And then if you're lucky enough and you're hardworking enough, I guess you'll go, right, I'm not doing that. Here's this new character I'm doing, or here's this new persona. And it's not so much about staying politically active, I think, as, although you may be politically active, and if you're a political comedian, obviously you've got to stay abreast of everything that's happening all the time. But if it's about shaking off a persona, then you statistically probably won't. And you just better thank your lucky stars that people still want to see that. But by and large, if you've made a persona, you can still do different material, but they'll come and see you because they liked that thing they first knew you for. And that's the way it goes. But yeah, so I wouldn't even worry about it being stuck in a rut. I mean, it just is what it is, and that's who you are. You get known for that thing. I mean, I suppose I'm trying to think of performers. No, I can't really think of someone that I would regard as stuck, so.
All right, awesome, thank you. So that is the last of our kind of formal interview questions, and we have more questions for you. So we're going to move on to those that have been submitted to us from teachers and students. And our first question comes from Western College, and they have asked, what advice would you give to anyone who's looking to go into a career in TV writing? I think this is specifically kind of TV writing.
You need obviously I'm much older, but I don't know of a single person, including young people, who have written for TV who didn't start in radio. And radio is very, very accessible. So you go onto the BBC website and you find out about young writers courses. They do quite a lot of them now. And they're all, they're free. You just have to get onto them. So you apply to every possible writing course that you can think of at the BBC, BBC Radio and BBC TV. I think Channel 4 are quite good at young writers things. The Guardian do young writers courses. They might not specifically be for television, but basically writing for TV and film is no different to writing, a letter to your auntie. It's all writing, and you have to get good at that. And you have to get good at telling a story and drawing a picture. They definitely want new writers. They're desperate for new writers, new young writers' stories. So, and the other thing you need to do is watch all the shows you like. Like, if you like sex education, watch all of it. All the shows. There's a new one, I think started last night, called Consent, which is about sexual assault in a school. That's meant to be amazing. I think that's Channel 4. Channel 4 are very good at representation of younger people. No, the BBC are pretty good at it. So you go onto all the television stations, their websites, and look for courses, and also look for courses in colleges. TV writing courses, because it might not seem like a great course, and it might not seem like it's given by anyone you've ever heard of or whose credits that you admire, but it's all hard work. What I mean is, it's all about doing the work. It's all about getting used to writing, doing it all the time, not going, oh, I don't feel like writing today. About keeping a notebook, jotting things down that you think are funny or interesting. You just have to have that kind of viewpoint of life from a writer's point of view at all times. I mean, I don't write that much anymore, but every single time I'm on a bus or a tube or walking around my area or other areas, I think that's funny. That would be interesting. I note these things down, and I doubt I'll ever write something sort of real in that way again. But have to keep your eyes peeled for everything, from the micro to the macro, and from the big to the, I could find a less pretentious way, from the little to the big. And you've got to write. You just have to plug away at it and really, but do courses, watch the shows that you admire. Think about, when you're watching, for example, Consent, think about the writing, find out who wrote it, research them, what their story is. Things like that will make a big, big difference. You might think, oh, well, this doesn't speak to me. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys, maybe you're all a bit small. There was a series that all the kids in my kids' school watched called Top Boy, about drug dealing on a North London council estate. That was written by 2 white middle-class guys. And even they said, and it's got Ashley Walters, it's mainly black people in this series, and they said it's terrible that we wrote it. And I think the guy that wrote it was because he lived near an estate where all that was going on. But he said, it shouldn't be me writing this. So have the courage to tell your own stories. And that's what people want to hear. They do want to hear young people's stories. But yeah, do lots of research. Find out who writes the stuff you like. And keep going at it. Because it's homework most of the time, I'm afraid to say.
So our next question, it comes from Heath Farm School, and they've asked, what subjects did you find most useful at school that you've continued to use in your career?
Mucking about. That's, as I've already told you, I've got no GCSEs, so that's actually a lie. I've got one, and that's Greek literature in translation. That was the only one I could pass, so you can imagine how useful that's been. The only use that GCSE has been to me is that I made quite a long joke out of it in my live show, and it did get a big laugh. I did English at A-level, and I loved reading, and I loved, it's so difficult not to sound pretentious, but I did notice when I read for English literature A-level that I was looking at the writing. And not because it was, analyze this writing. It was because I liked I was drawn to the process of telling a story through a book or through a story, through the medium of writing. So I would say English lit. But I'm afraid mucking about has served me pretty well as well. But I haven't got a qualification in that, just a career.
I love that. A very honest answer that some teachers may not enjoy,
yes,
but it's still very truthful.
It as a way of carrying on in class.
So our next couple of questions have been submitted anonymously. So the first one is, how do you turn an idea into a joke?
Now that is a very good question, because you probably all know people who've got no sense of humour. So impossible. Then there's another set of people who go, this is funny, and you think it's not even remotely funny. I mean, I don't even know how you got there. And I don't mean because it's about something super sad, or they're just going, oh, this was hilarious, and you think it's just not. Anybody who does comedy just has a slightly different. I mean, I absolutely adored one of my grannies. I hated one of them, but I really adored one of my grannies. But I was so upset when she died. I mean, really upset. But at her funeral, I made jokes, obviously not at my granny's expense. They weren't mean jokes about my granny or her life or anything like that. But I think they were jokes. I've forgotten what I did, but because that's what I do. That's my skew on life. I can see practically anything, the funny side of anything. I mean, I've got to tell you, I don't know how many of you watched the finale of Happy Valley. I won't spoil it in case you haven't watched, but there's a scene that is meant to be like the big scene. And all I could do was think, this is funny. So I was thinking, if I'd been doing this, I wouldn't have been able to, because it was the, well, you're shit. Yeah, well, yeah. Well, I don't like you. Well, I don't like it. And I was thinking, no, this is funny. So I mean, it didn't include violence. Obviously, there are things that aren't funny, but it's your take on a situation. I did not think my granny dying was funny. I miss her every day. I adored her. And this was over 30 years ago. But there were things that happened, like the vicar was talking to my granny's coffin. Now that's funny because obviously my granny's dead, but he was doing a whole kind of, so Sheila, and afterwards I made people laugh by going, that's quite odd to be having a conversation, So there are things that are comic. There's absurdity. That's what it is. If you can see the absurdity in a situation, that's how you write comedy. You take the absurdity. You don't make jokes about violence and stuff. You make jokes about the situation.
Okay, so I think we have time for one more question before we come to the closing comments from yourself. So we'll go for our last question to be, what question would you like to answer that never gets asked of you? That might be a difficult one. Happy to go for another one if you can't answer that one.
I never get asked if I'm proud of my achievements. And because I was a woman in comedy, without question, male dominated at the time, yes, I think I'm a bit of a trailblazer, and I'm very proud of that. I'm quite militant about it as well. But I wrote an article in The Guardian only a few years ago, which you can Google, when the Me Too thing blew up. And if you've been working as long as I do, I'm not saying the Me Too thing for 1 second is acceptable. But sexual harassment, sexual comments about your appearance, comments about your weight were absolutely the norm when I started out, and up until about 15 years ago. I mean, just the norm. And you were expected, if you wanted to be regarded as fun, to sort of go, oh, thanks, or, fall in and stuff, but in no shape or form go, what are you talking about? Do not speak to me like that. So I'm proud of the fact that I've always been a badass.
Certainly, I like that. A nice way to kind of go towards the end as we're finishing. So before we close today's session, do you have any kind of final thoughts, comments, or feelings that you would like to leave our students with?
My words of caution, And for all that your parents, as mine certainly did, will say you can't go into that job, you'll never earn a living, you're not that funny, you're not as pretty as her, you're not as good as him. Maybe you don't have parents who are as horrible as mine, but you know, mine was an absolute barrage of why you're not good enough, it's too hard, and you won't make it. It was a long time. As I say, I used to be a temp, and I was temping a lot for the first 15 years of my career. And so there were many, many moments in that time that I thought, I'm obviously not going to earn a living. I'm obviously not going to make it. And make it is not being on EastEnders or Love Island. I know they're not actors, but you know, whatever it is, making it is working consistently and getting recognized by your peers and the people who employ. You may not end up being, I don't know, Matt Smith, David Tennant, you know, Sarah Lancashire, but you might be working all the time. And if you love what you do, writing or performing or both, keep plugging away at it, because there is no feeling that will compare to doing a job you love and doing a job you hate because you didn't dare have a go at that. You know, life, the world will sort out whether you're going to crack it or not at your chosen job. Don't be put off by my statistics about how few people earn a living. You know, if you think you can do it, the only way you'll find out is having a go. So give it a go. If you think you can do it, just go for it. Plug away, but don't give up at the first hurdle. You know, the first time, I mean, I can't personally think of anything more awful. And it's happened to me many times, of making a joke or doing a little piece in front of a live audience, and you're met with nothing but stony faces. You literally want to die. You're just thinking, kill me now, get me off the stage. It's much worse than being naked in public. It's awful. The whole sea of people are going, nah, don't get it, what? And you have to take that away, and they're not always right. You may have landed it badly, the joke or whatever. It's not that they're right and you're wrong. It's that that's part of your journey. There is no way. The finest comedians, the most successful ones you've ever heard of, they've all got a story where they bombed, and it's getting over them. But absolutely go for it if you think you're good at it, or if you think you've even maybe slightly good at it. But also be part of your own success. You know, set up an open mic night. 9 people might turn up, but all of that will turn you into who you want to be. And don't let anyone tell you. I mean, you know, as I say, the world will sort out if you can't do it or not. You don't need to sort of get ahead of them by going, I'm probably no good at this. And there is no feeling in the world compared to doing a job you love. And doing a job you hate is miserable. So don't do that.
I love that kind of as a final quote to finish on, be part of your own success. I think that's a really kind of nice note to think about as we close today's session. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been really nice to hear from you and your journey through comedy,